When my son told me that I would not be welcome at his house for Christmas, I smiled, got in my car, and made one call. By the new year, I had their mortgage payments canceled, and that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I could make my famous turkey this year, I said, settling deeper into Michael's leather couch. The one with the sage stuffing your mother used to love. Remember how she'd always say it was better than her grandmother's? The words hung in the warm air between us, mixing with the scent of Isabella's expensive vanilla candles. Michael shifted beside me, his wedding ring catching the light from their 12-foot Christmas tree. Something in his posture changed, shoulders pulling inward like he was bracing for impact. Dad, unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas. The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What do you mean? Why wouldn't I be welcome? Michael couldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the marble coffee table, the one I'd helped him pick out last spring when Isabella decided their old furniture wasn't sophisticated enough. Isabella's parents are coming and they'd prefer if you weren't here. My hands went cold. They'd prefer? It's just easier this way, Dad. You know how her family is about traditions. They have their own way of doing things. His voice got smaller with each word, like he was shrinking inside himself. I looked around the living room, at the silk curtains I'd paid for when Isabella complained about privacy, at the hardwood floors that had come from my second mortgage, at the crown molding that had maxed out my credit card. Every inch of this house bore my fingerprints, my sacrifice, my love for my son. Their own way, I repeated slowly. And what way is that, Michael? He flinched. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Through the kitchen archway, I could see Isabella's new KitchenAid mixer, the professional-grade one she'd insisted she needed for her holiday baking phase that lasted exactly 3 weeks. $2,000 of my money sitting there, probably used twice since October. Where will I spend Christmas, then? The question came out quieter than I intended. Michael's face crumpled. Maybe you could, I don't know, maybe visit Aunt Rosa, or we could do something the weekend after? The weekend after. Like Christmas was just another appointment that could be rescheduled for convenience. I stood up, my knees protesting after 8 years of carrying this burden alone. I see. Dad, wait. But I was already moving toward the door, past the family photos where my face grew smaller and more distant in each frame, past the coat closet that held Isabella's $1,000 jackets. My hand found the doorknob, solid and cold under my palm. Son, I said without turning around. Tell Isabella's parents I said Feliz Navidad. The December air hit my face like a slap as I walked toward my truck. Behind me, I heard Michael call my name once, then the soft click of the door closing. Final. Absolute. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, engine off, watching the Christmas lights twinkle in the windows of houses I'd never be welcome in. My phone buzzed, probably Michael wanting to smooth things over with empty promises and guilt. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the warm glow of the house I'd bought, but would never belong in. The heater hummed against the December cold as I navigated the familiar streets toward home. South Hills sprawled around me, every neighborhood corner holding memories of the man I used to be, the one who believed family meant everything, who'd give his last dollar to see his son smile. That man was a fool. I stopped at the red light on 29th and Grand, watching a young father load Christmas presents into his SUV. His kids pressed their faces against the window, breath fogging the glass with excitement. Once upon a time, that had been Michael and me. Before Isabella, before I became nothing more than a walking ATM with inconvenient emotions, the numbers started rolling through my head like a broken slot machine. $2,800 every month for 5 years. My calculator had given up trying to make sense of it last spring when I'd finally added up the total, $140,000. More money than Maria and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. Just gone. I pressed the accelerator harder than necessary as the light turned green. The truck responded with a growl that matched my mood. 5th Street. That was where I'd refinanced my house. Our house, Maria's, and mine. to cover their down payment. The loan officer had looked at me with pity I hadn't recognized at the time. "Mr. Flores, are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment? Not my son's future, not my family's security. Someone else's investment. Lincoln Street, the bank where I'd taken out a second mortgage when Michael lost his job 2 years ago. "Just temporary, Dad. Just until I get back on my feet." Isabella had stood behind him, $700 purse slung over her shoulder, nodding sympathetically while mentally calculating how much my desperation was worth. Nothing, as it turned out. My desperation was worth nothing to them. I pulled into my driveway, the one with the cracked concrete I couldn't afford to fix, because every spare dollar disappeared into their perfect suburban fantasy. The porch light flickered, another repair I'd been putting off. Inside, the house felt hollow without Maria's laughter, without the warmth of family gatherings that would never happen again. My phone rang as I fumbled with my keys, the shrill tone echoing off the empty walls. Isabella's name flashed on the screen, probably wanting to explain why I wasn't good enough for her parents' delicate sensibilities. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 5 years to have this conversation. I answered on the fourth ring, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I'd pick up at all. "Dennis!" Isabella's voice dripped with false sweetness, the same tone she used when asking me to cover their water bill or property taxes. "I heard about the little misunderstanding with Michael." "Misunderstanding?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my coat. "I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Isabella. You made your position quite clear." "Look, I know this seems harsh, but you have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional people. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays." "A certain atmosphere," I repeated. "And what atmosphere is that?" A pause. I could hear shopping bags rustling in the background, probably spending money that should have gone to their mortgage payment, money that was my responsibility, apparently. "Well, they're not used to your kind of cooking. All that spicy Mexican food and loud music. And frankly, Dennis, they're educated people. They expect conversations about current events, literature, art, you know." The words hit harder than a physical blow. 8 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing insults for Michael's sake, of pretending not to notice the way she looked at me like I was some kind of hired help. "My kind of cooking." My voice stayed level, controlled. "You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 3 years when money was tight? The tamales you said reminded you of your grandmother?" That was different. We were appreciative then, but now with my parents... "Now with your parents, you can't have the Mexican peasant embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table." The false sweetness evaporated. "Don't be dramatic, Dennis. This isn't about race, it's about class. My father graduated summa cum laude from Washington State. My mother speaks 4 languages. They summer in the Hamptons. What exactly would you contribute to dinner conversation? Stories about laying tile?" Heat flooded my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "I built a business from nothing after your husband's grandfather died. I've employed over 50 people. I've paid more in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, Dennis. Breeding matters. Education matters. And frankly, Maria understood her place better than you understand yours." The line went dead silent. She'd crossed it. The line I didn't even know existed until she'd stomped across it in her designer heels. "What did you say about my wife?" "I'm just saying she knew how to blend in better. She didn't make waves. She understood that some spaces weren't meant for her." My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. "Maria had more class in her little finger than your entire bloodline will ever possess." "Oh, please. She was a house cleaner who got lucky. At least she had the good sense to stay quiet about it." "Isabella?" My voice dropped to something I didn't recognize. "I want you to listen very carefully. This conversation is over. We're done pretending to be family. You can't just—" "We're done," I repeated, and ended the call. I set the phone down carefully on the counter, my hands surprisingly steady. Around me, the kitchen felt different, smaller but somehow cleaner, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. I walked to my desk in the corner, pulled out the manila folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements, mortgage papers, 5 years of automatic transfers that had bled me dry while they lived like royalty. Time to stop the bleeding. Part 4. The first decision, canceling the mortgage. The documents spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. 5 years of bank statements, each one showing the same automatic transfer. $2,800 on the 15th of every month, vanishing from my account into theirs. A paper trail of my own stupidity. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. The first year, $33,600. The second year, another $33,600. By the third year, I'd stopped buying myself new clothes. The fourth year, I'd started shopping at discount grocery stores. This year, the fifth year, I'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make ends meet. $143,400. Not counting the down payment, not counting the times I'd covered their utilities when Isabella's shopping addiction got out of hand. Not counting the new roof, the landscaping, the furniture that was essential for their lifestyle. I sat back in my chair, looking at the numbers until they blurred. Maria's life insurance money, my retirement savings, the college fund we'd started for grandchildren I'd apparently never be allowed to see. All of it gone, poured into a house where I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my bank. The automated system offered me options in English and Spanish. How thoughtful, how accommodating to people like me. Customer service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Certainly, sir. I'll need your account number and some verification information. I rattled off the numbers, watched her type in the background. Professional, efficient, no judgment about why a 62-year-old man was canceling payments to what was probably his son's mortgage. I see the transfer you're referring to, Mr. Flores. $2,800 monthly to Wells Fargo, account ending in 7423. How long have you been making this transfer? 5 years. The words tasted bitter. And you want to cancel it effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen, at the outdated appliances I couldn't afford to replace, at the walls that needed painting, at the windows that leaked cold air because I'd spent my home improvement money on someone else's castle. Effective immediately, I confirmed. Done. The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, surprising myself with how good the word felt. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden quiet of my house. Outside, December darkness was settling over Spokane, Christmas lights twinkling in windows where families gathered without conditions, without judgment, without the need to hide who they were. For the first time in 5 years, next month's budget would balance. For the first time since Maria died, I could afford to fix my porch light, buy decent groceries, maybe even take a vacation. I gathered up the bank statements, the mortgage papers, all the evidence of my generosity. Then I walked to my fireplace, struck a match, and watched 5 years of martyrdom turn to ash. The fire felt warm on my face, warmer than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed with a text message, probably Michael wanting to apologize, or Isabella, needing money for something essential like new throw pillows. I didn't check it. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. Tonight felt special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to Maria's photo on the mantel, to the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said, and meant it. Part 5. Isabella's Provocation. The next morning arrived crisp and clear, December sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows as I nursed my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much money would disappear from my account in 3 days. The freedom tasted better than the Colombian blend I'd finally allowed myself to buy. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m. Isabella's name flashed on the screen like a warning label. Dennis! Her voice carried that familiar tone of barely concealed impatience. I need you to pick up my parents from Spokane Airport. Their flight from Portland arrives at 2 o'clock. I set down my mug carefully, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling. Isabella, did you forget about our conversation yesterday? Look, Whatever that was about, we need to focus on practical matters now. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one with time during the day. The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't worthy of sharing Christmas dinner with her family, she expected me to serve as their personal chauffeur. And you're asking me because that's what family does, Dennis. They help each other. Her voice sharpened with irritation. Besides, let's be honest here. You're not my rival. You're too weak to be my rival. So just get in your truck and pick them up. There it was, the final insult wrapped in a command. What airline? I asked quietly. Alaska Air, Flight 447. They'll be at baggage claim Carousel 3. And Dennis, they're expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping against something hard, probably her granite countertop, the one I'd paid for when she decided laminate wasn't suitable for her dinner parties. Of course, I said. I'll take care of everything. Good. And wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Michael's graduation. They notice things like that. The line went dead. She hadn't even said thank you. I sat back in my chair, looking at my phone's blank screen. 2:00. Flight 447. Baggage claim Carousel 3. I glanced at the wall clock above my sink. 10:52 a.m. Plenty of time. I poured myself another cup of coffee, added an extra spoonful of sugar, and opened yesterday's newspaper to the crossword puzzle I hadn't finished. 7 across. Delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would come to me eventually. Part 6. The Airport Trap. At 2:15 p.m., I was settling into my favorite armchair, with a fresh cup of Earl Grey and the Spokane Review's Sunday edition. The crossword from yesterday lay completed on my coffee table. Delayed gratification had been postponement. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface. Isabella's name again. I let it ring. The December sun slanted through my living room windows, warming the space where I'd spent so many lonely evenings counting the cost of my generosity. Today the silence felt different. Earned, intentional. 2:47 p.m. The phone buzzed again. This time I could see the preview of her text. Dad, where are you? My parents are. I turned the phone face down and returned to the sports section. The Seahawks had lost again. Some things never changed. By 3:30 my phone had buzzed 6 times. I'd finished the newspaper, brewed a second pot of tea, and started organizing the junk drawer in my kitchen table. Amazing what you could accomplish when you weren't rushing around serving people who considered you their personal bellhop. The 7th call came at 3:45. Instead of Isabella's name, I saw unknown number. Probably her parents borrowed someone's phone at the airport. I let that one ring too. Outside, a neighbor was hanging Christmas lights on his porch, his children running around the yard with the manic energy that only December afternoons could bring. Normal families doing normal things. No one was stranded anywhere, waiting for someone who would never come. 4:15 p.m. My phone started ringing and didn't stop. Isabella, then the unknown number, then Isabella again. The buzzing became constant, like an angry wasp trapped against glass. I walked to my kitchen and unplugged my landline from the wall. Then I turned my cell phone completely off. Perfect silence. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and heated up a can of tomato soup. Comfort food I hadn't allowed myself in months, because every grocery dollar had gone toward making ends meet, while subsidizing their lifestyle. The cheese melted perfectly golden, the soup steamed in my favorite mug. Outside, the winter sun was already starting to set, casting long shadows across my backyard. Somewhere across town, 3 people were probably standing in an airport parking garage, arguing about taxi fare and wondering how their personal servant had the audacity to strand them. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 5 p.m. I'd eaten dinner, loaded my dishwasher, and was considering what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had an entire evening to myself without worrying about emergency calls for money or last-minute favors. I was reaching for the remote when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of aggressive hammering that rattled the frame and announced pure fury. I set down my tea and walked slowly toward the sound, already knowing exactly who I'd find on the other side. The pounding intensified as I approached the door, each blow more violent than the last. Through the peephole, I could see 3 figures crowded on my small porch, like wolves circling prey. I opened the door to find Cody Jenkins's red face inches from mine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. "We waited at that goddamn airport for over 3 hours." Catherine followed him, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her lips pressed into a thin line of pure hatred. "This is completely unacceptable behavior from someone your age, Dennis. Absolutely barbaric." Isabella brought up the rear, her designer coat wrinkled, her makeup smeared. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a $40 taxi because you decided to get out of my house." My voice cut through their chorus of rage like a blade through silk. They stopped mid-rant, shocked by the steel in my tone. "Excuse me?" Cody's face went from red to purple. "You don't get to make demands here, buddy. Not after what you pulled today." "This is my house," I said quietly, not moving from my position by the door, "and I want you out. Now." Catherine stepped forward, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension she'd perfected over decades of looking down on people like me. "Dennis, you clearly don't understand the magnitude of your mistake. My husband has connections throughout this city. Business connections, social connections. You can't treat people like us this way and expect—" "This was a lesson for you," I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. "A lesson about your excessive arrogance and your poor treatment of people you consider beneath you." Isabella's mouth fell open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're nobody. I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service." I stepped aside and held the door open wider. "The lesson is over. You can leave." Cody jabbed a finger toward my chest, but didn't quite dare touch me. "You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. I've been in this town longer than you've been breathing its air. I know people, important people, people who can make your life very, very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. Jenkins?" "It's a promise." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You think abandoning elderly people at an airport is just something you can do without consequences? You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are?" Catherine nodded, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Indeed. Actions have consequences, Dennis, and yours will be quite public." Isabella grabbed her father's arm. "Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old man isn't worth our time." They filed out of my house like a defeated army, but Cody turned back at the threshold. "You'll regret this," he said. "I guarantee it." I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them pile into their rental car, still arguing among themselves as they drove away into the December darkness. The house felt cleaner with them gone, as if their presence had left a stain that was only now lifting, but their parting words echoed in the sudden quiet. Public consequences, important people, connections. I walked back to my living room and picked up my tea, still warm in its mug. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt something that might have been concern, but it was overwhelmed by something much stronger: anticipation. 3 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee and scanning the Spokane Review when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3. The headline read, "Spokane Businessman Abandons Elderly Couple at Airport During Holiday Storm." My hands went still around the coffee mug. There I was, in black and white, an old photo from my company's website, probably 5 years out of date. Below it, a story that made my blood run cold and my temper flare in equal measure. Cody and Catherine Jenkins, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at Spokane International Airport for over 4 hours Sunday when family member Dennis Flores failed to appear for a prearranged pickup. The couple, both in their late 50s, waited in frigid temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning. It had been 52 degrees and sunny. "We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that," said Cody Jenkins, a retired banking executive. "We called repeatedly, but Mr. Flores never answered his phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just inconsiderate. It's dangerous." The article continued with quotes about my pattern of erratic behavior and concerns about my mental state. Cody had painted himself and Catherine as helpless victims of a cruel old man who'd suddenly snapped without provocation. No mention of the Christmas dinner rejection, no context about Isabella's demands or their years of financial exploitation. Just me, the villain who abandoned poor elderly tourists during a blizzard that existed only in Cody's imagination. I set down my coffee and read the article again, slowly, then a third time. The byline belonged to Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the strategy. Cody had called in favors, used his banking connections to get this story placed exactly where it would do maximum damage to my reputation. Smart, very smart. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a grudging respect for my opponents. They weren't just entitled trust fund babies throwing tantrums. They were strategic, calculating. They understood that in a small city like Spokane, reputation was everything. One well-placed newspaper article could destroy decades of hard work. They'd declared total war. I folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside, my mind already shifting into the methodical planning mode that had built my business from nothing. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. This wasn't about Christmas dinner or mortgage payments. This was about winning. I pulled out my laptop and began typing names into search engines. Cody Jenkins, Catherine Jenkins, Isabella Flores, their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they'd foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at my wall calendar. December 18th. 7 days until Christmas. 7 days to plan something they'd never forget. I spent the next 3 days living in a different world. Not the world where I was Dennis Flores, the broken-down old man who let his family walk all over him. This was the world where I was Dennis Flores, businessman, strategic thinker, someone who'd built something from nothing and wasn't about to let a bunch of entitled parasites destroy what I'd worked 40 years to build. My laptop became command central. Social media profiles filled my browser tabs like playing cards in a high-stakes game. Cody Jenkins, retired First National Bank manager, member of the Spokane Country Club, treasurer of the Inland Northwest Business Leaders Association. A man who'd spent his career in positions of trust and influence, a man with a lot to lose. Catherine's Instagram painted a perfect picture of refined living, charity luncheons, wine tastings, vacation photos from Coeur d'Alene tagged with Chash Blessed Life. Every post carefully curated to project success and sophistication. Comments from friends praising her elegant taste and inspiring lifestyle, all built on other people's money, including mine. Isabella's Facebook timeline told the real story. Posts about our beautiful home with photos of the kitchen I'd paid for. Check-ins at expensive restaurants during the months when I'd covered their utility bills. A status update from last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills. Our home. Our success. The narcissism was breathtaking. But it was Michael's LinkedIn profile that gave me the final piece I needed. His recent activity showed a new connection. Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor at the Spokane Review. The same Patricia Morrison who'd written the hatchet job about me. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the evidence spread across my screen. These people had made 3 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated me completely. Second, they'd gone public with their attack, which meant I could go public with my response. Third, they'd documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of hypocrisy. I clicked through to Patricia Morrison's profile. 43 years old, journalism degree from WSU, 15 years at local papers. No previous connection to banking or finance, which meant Cody had reached out cold, probably through someone he knew from his business network. A 5-minute search through local business directories confirmed my suspicion. 3 mutual connections between Cody and Patricia's editor. The story hadn't just appeared, it had been planted carefully and deliberately. Amateur hour. I opened a new document and began typing. Not a response to their media attack, something much better. A timeline. 5 years of financial support, documented with bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks. The down payment for their house, $47,000 from my home equity loan. The kitchen renovation when Isabella decided granite countertops were essential. $18,000 from my credit card, 60 monthly mortgage payments of $2,800 each, $168,000 and counting, $250,000, more than I'd spent on myself in the last decade. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Probably Isabella, trying a new angle. I ignored it and kept working. By evening, I had everything organized in a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Bank statements, receipts, photos downloaded from their social media showing off purchases I'd funded, a printed copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins, documenting each lie and distortion. I looked at my wall calendar. December 24th was circled in red, not because it was Christmas, but because it was the perfect day for justice. According to Isabella's Facebook events, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 12 people. Family friends, neighbors, members of their social circle. The kind of people who read the Spokane Review and formed opinions based on what they saw there. The kind of people who deserved to know the truth. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen, where I'd left my good camera, the one I'd bought years ago to document job sites for my business. Time to put it to work, documenting something else entirely. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Tomorrow, Cody Jenkins and his family were going to learn what happened when you declared war on someone who actually knew how to fight. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of Spokane winter day that made you grateful for warm houses and family gatherings. Too bad I wouldn't be welcome at either. But I had other plans. I laid out my evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial. Bank statements organized by year, each monthly payment highlighted in yellow. Receipts arranged chronologically, showing the pattern of my support for their lifestyle. Photos printed from their social media. Isabella's new jewelry, their vacation photos, the expensive Christmas decorations currently adorning the house I'd helped them keep. All of it copied 12 times, one for each dinner guest. The newspaper article went on top of each stack, my red pen notes visible in the margins. Lie written next to Cody's quotes about dangerous weather. False, beside the claim about my erratic behavior. Missing context, highlighted where they'd failed to mention 5 years of financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to Maria's funeral, pressed and ready for another kind of farewell. Today I was saying goodbye to the man who'd been a doormat for his family. Tonight I'd be someone who commanded respect. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded my briefcase with the evidence packets and drove to Kendall Yards. Their house glowed with warm light, cars filling the driveway and lining the street. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving around the dining room, Isabella playing hostess in the home my money had helped them buy. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45. Perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be seated for dinner. Early enough that they'd still be on the main course. No easy escape for anyone. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Isabella loved to show off how safe their neighborhood was, how they didn't need to worry about security, like people in rougher areas. I let myself in quietly, the warm air hitting my face along with the sounds of laughter and conversation from the dining room. And then Catherine said, "But darling, that's not how we do things in our family," someone was saying, followed by more laughter. Our family. After everything they'd done to exclude me from it. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase, 12 faces turning toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Isabella froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Michael's face went pale. Cody and Catherine looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on their marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Isabella found her voice first. "Dennis, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack of papers, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize, probably one of Catherine's charity friends, leaned forward with curiosity. "What is he talking about, Isabella?" "He's having some kind of episode," Isabella said quickly. "Michael, call someone." But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents in front of each guest. "Here are the bank records," I said conversationally. 5 years of financial support, $168,000 in mortgage payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room went silent except for the rustling of papers as 12 people began examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof of my generosity and their deception. "This is," one man started, then stopped, staring at a bank statement. "Outrageous," finished the woman across from him. "Isabella, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Isabella's perfect composure was cracking. "It's more complicated than it looks. Dennis volunteered to help us. We never asked." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out the newspaper article, "let's talk about what you did ask for, and what you told the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I placed copies of the newspaper article on the table, watching as the dinner guests recognized my photo from the unflattering story that had run 3 days earlier. "Now," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence, "let's talk about the real manipulators in this family." Cody's face had gone from red to ashen. Catherine sat rigid in her chair, her wine glass forgotten in her hand. "Mr. Jenkins here used his banking connections to plant this story," I continued, tapping the newspaper. "Notice how I'm portrayed as unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor elderly people in freezing weather." A gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up from the article. "Cody, what is this about?" "The weather was 52 degrees and sunny," I said before Cody could answer. "And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Isabella's parents, coming to the Christmas dinner I'd been banned from attending because I wasn't good enough for their company." Catherine finally found her voice. "That's not... We never said..." "You never said what, Catherine?" I pulled out my phone where I'd screenshotted several of Isabella's social media posts. "That I was too low-class for your parents? That my Mexican food and working-class conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends?" The woman I'd identified as one of Catherine's charity friends shifted uncomfortably. "Catherine, surely you didn't—" "He's twisting everything," Cody blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "This man has serious mental health issues. The stress of aging, financial problems." "Financial problems?" I almost laughed. "Mr. Jenkins, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $3,000 a month for 5 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have." I turned to address the entire table. "These people have taken $200,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They've manipulated my son against me, banned me from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the newspaper." Michael spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper." "Your wife knew," I said quietly, "and her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain for refusing to be their personal ATM and chauffeur." The social dynamic in the room was shifting like tectonic plates. I could see it in the guests' faces, the gradual realization that everything they'd been told about tonight's generous hosts was built on lies. "This is unconscionable," said an elderly woman in pearls staring at the bank statements. "Cody, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this man's generosity, then attack him publicly when he stopped enabling it?" Cody's carefully maintained facade was crumbling. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly," the woman interrupted. "This man has been supporting your family financially while you treated him like hired help. And when he finally said no, you tried to ruin his reputation." Catherine's voice came out strangled. "He abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your parents," I said calmly. "After 5 years of paying their bills while you looked down on me for my ethnicity and education level." The silence was deafening. 12 people staring at Cody and Catherine with expressions ranging from disgust to embarrassment for having associated with them. Isabella made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Everyone, please. This is a family matter that's gotten out of hand." "No," I said firmly. "This stopped being a family matter when you made it public, when you used the newspaper to attack my character, when you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral damage for your pride." I looked around the table at faces I didn't recognize but who now knew exactly who I was. "I wanted you all to know the truth before you read about Dennis Flores in the paper again, because you will read about me again. But next time, it'll be the real story. I closed my briefcase and straightened my tie. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for. As I walked toward the door, I could hear the eruption beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation, questions demanding answers, the sound of a carefully constructed social facade falling apart. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by certified mail with the weight of legal consequences behind every word. I signed for it at my front door, noting how the spring air smelled of new growth and possibility instead of the winter desperation that had marked those dark December days. Notice of default, the envelope read, final demand for payment. Inside, 3 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up with Michael and Isabella like a tsunami of reality. $8,400 in arrears, 14 days to bring the account current, or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee, reading it the way you'd read news about distant weather. Interesting, but not your problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks with increasingly desperate calls. Isabella's number blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. Cody and Catherine, whose social standing in Spokane had evaporated like morning mist after their Christmas dinner humiliation. Even Michael, whose calls I'd been ignoring out of a mixture of anger and curiosity about how long it would take him to swallow his pride. The answer, apparently, was 97 days. He knocked on my door that Thursday evening, no longer the confident man who'd excluded me from Christmas dinner, but someone who looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. Dark circles under his eyes, his expensive suit wrinkled, the smell of desperation clinging to him like cheap cologne. "Dad," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck, the fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated in 8 years, because every spare dollar had gone to his lifestyle. The repairs I'd finally been able to afford now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's American dream. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee?" He shook his head, perching on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am. About everything. Christmas dinner, the newspaper article, the way Isabella, the way we treated you." "Go on." "I didn't know about Cody planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I found out—" He ran his hands through his hair. "Jesus, Dad. The things they said about you behind your back. The way they talked about our family. About Mom's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Maria, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your mother?" "That she knew her place better than you knew yours. That she understood. Boundaries." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 5 years of mistakes filling the space between us. Outside, I could hear my neighbor mowing his lawn, the normal sounds of a normal Thursday evening in a normal neighborhood, where sons didn't exclude their fathers from Christmas dinner. "The house is in foreclosure," Michael said finally. "I know. We can't make the payments without—" He stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage. I know how it looks." "Michael." I leaned forward, making sure he was looking at me. "Do you know how much money I sent you over 5 years?" He nodded miserably. Isabella calculated it after Christmas. The mortgage payments, the down payment, everything else. Over $200,000. $237,468, I corrected. "I know the exact amount because I finally did something I should have done years ago. I added it up." His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son. That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years when I could have been building a relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy life." I know that now." He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "But maybe we could start over? Maybe there's a way to. Are you asking me to resume the mortgage payments? The hope died in his eyes. We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Isabella's respect for me, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. He started to cry then, quietly, like a man who'd run out of other options. I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever. I watched him for a long moment, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd let his wife's family convince him that his father wasn't good enough for their company. Michael, I said finally, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that I'm going to resume paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I be grateful for scraps of your attention. Then what does it mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel, where Maria's photo sat next to a new picture. Me with Rosa and her family at Easter dinner, the first holiday I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect instead of demanding I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's convenient. I turned back to him, and it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me from family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. He nodded slowly, understanding perhaps for the first time that respect wasn't something you could take for granted. The house, he asked quietly, isn't my problem anymore. I sat back down, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're a grown man, Michael. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize your choices. He stood up slowly, his shoulders straight, for the first time since he'd arrived. You're right, about all of it. I know. He walked to the door, then turned back. Dad, for what it's worth, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, but proud too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and stepped onto my back porch. Spring was coming to Spokane, the trees beginning to bud, the air warming with promise. In 4 months, I'd be 63. Maria had been gone for 8 years. I'd wasted 5 of those years being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate sacrifice. I wasn't planning to waste any more. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Dinner Sunday? The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't welcome on stage. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.